we sang this morning is a beautiful song to think about and to meditate about. When I was thinking whether I was going to go all the way through ministerial school or just become a licensed Unity teacher or quit altogether, this song brought me back. Here I am, Lord. Because our lives are meant to be the hands, the feet, the mouths of that Christ consciousness that lives within all of us. So while Tim plays, I'd like us to gently close our eyes and relax into the music to this song. As we open up our hearts at the beginning of this Holy Week for this Christ consciousness to come into us, to take root in the depths of our soul. Feel yourself opening. Visualize an inner altar in which you lay your palms and anything else that you'd like to lay down. As you put all on this altar, stand within to that I am presence, knowing, here I am, Lord. It is I, Lord. I will hold your people close. I will do your work. And I will do your work in my family. I will do your work in my community. I will do your work in ministry if you call. Here I am, Lord. Now let's take that into a little bit of silence. Here I am, Lord. As we come back to the here and to the now, we come back refreshed, renewed, open to whatever universal spirit decides for us. When you feel ready, you can open your eyes exciting morning already, huh? Good morning, Unity of the West Side. I am your minister.
Good morning.
Good morning. I welcome you, and I love you as God loves you. Today I want to talk about a spiritual practice, and I have many spiritual practices. You know, I pray a lot on Saturday nights. That's usually what I'm doing. I'm staying home writing sermons or praying, just in case you wondered. I have a coffee mug that says, I like to party. And by party, that means stay in and write sermons. Sometimes I pray in an organized, structured way, and other times I merely say I love you, or I declare divine order, because that's a prayer too. I meditate as a spiritual practice. I journal as a spiritual practice, and just for kicks, I like to write denials and affirmations for myself. It's kind of hokey, but if you come visit my house, on my bathroom mirror, there's likely to be 1 or 2 denials and a whole bunch of affirmations. Because I believe the denials are important, like taking the palms and sweeping away the dust in the room on this Palm Sunday. That's what denials do. They sweep away the cobwebs of energy that might still be there. And then the affirmation comes in to stand strong and to affirm this is what is. Finally, I practice forgiveness. I read an interesting article by a friend who used to speak here several times. His name is Reverend Bill Englehart, and you might know him. He's Reverend Kieran's guy. That's what I call him, Reverend Kieran's guy. Some of this talk is based on that article. So I call on these spiritual practice because they call it a spiritual practice because you need to do it over and over and over again. So when we say something is a practice, yeah, you're going to have to do it more than once. Prayer practice, more than once. Forgiveness practice, more than once. Forgiveness is the act of releasing ourselves from the bondage of an ongoing negative situation. Have you ever experienced an ongoing negative situation, or was it just me?
No.
Maybe you didn't even realize it until you got away from that other person. And then, aha, you feel lighter. You feel less intense without them there in your space, giving off their energy to you that you take in. Forgiveness resurrects our peace of mind from the feelings of victimhood and allows us to release all negative judgments. I forgive by nature pretty easily. Used to drive my ex-husband crazy because we'd be fighting and we'd be saying words back and forth, you know, how couples do. And once I get it all out and I feel like you've heard me, I'm done. So like in the middle, what he considered the middle of a heated discussion or a fight, I'd say, so we're gonna go have pancakes this morning? And he'd be like, you just cursed me up and down myself, and now you want pancakes? And he would roll his eyes, and he never really got comfortable with how fast I get over anger. I tend to forgive quickly and completely, except for myself. Now that lady, I drag her through the muck and the mud and the mire of my worst thoughts about myself. I take a lot of that into prayer and meditation, and I find that I'm much kinder to myself when I'm in that elevated state of consciousness of prayer. I share this with you because, as always, I want you to understand that I am a work in progress, and maybe you are too. We forgive others to get our footing back from rocky emotional terrain, and when done, it can be an exquisite joy. When we follow Jesus' teaching in the Lord's Prayer, with the elevated consciousness, we say, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. We give others as we sometimes need forgiveness ourselves. When done, we throw off the shackles and the chains of this negative and sometimes toxic connection. Forgiveness starts with me, and it's a gift that we give ourselves. You know, I went through this class called Eye of the Storm, and while going through it, I had an issue. I was having an issue with one of my family members, and I was encouraged by the minister who taught the class, who I greatly respected, to reach out and write a letter of forgiveness and send it to them. And I earnestly sat down and did this work. I prayed, and then I poured my heart out to them with this love for this person, all the things that this person has done right and lovingly in my life. And I sent it off knowing that I was pure love. For almost a month and a half, I heard nothing back, but finally I received a response. And it was not a loving letter. It was quite cruel and mean in the tone and in the words. For a week or so, I was kind of numb. But then something happened to me. I remembered I was at a fork in the road. Have you ever had those moments in life where you know you're at a fork? You're going to go this way or you're going to go this way. I could pick up the anger again, or I could let it be. I had already forgiven them. I reread the letter. My letter to her and her letter to me. And what I realized is this hate and vile coming from that person had nothing to do with me or anything that I've ever done. I chose the let it be road. We don't have to condone anyone's bad behavior or trust that those who mistreat us, we don't have to trust them. We don't have to just give our power, I just don't give it the power and the energy that I once did. My friends, this is the gift of the spiritual work of forgiveness. Finally, I was able to release the negative connection and the power that this person held over me. Years have passed now, and I have a very polite and distant relationship with this person. But I had made my mind up to let it be, to let go. I couldn't carry that person's hate or anger any longer. If that's where they are, so be it. I accept that. But this is an important part. In their presence, when I'm in their presence, I have total love for them. I am good to them, and I am good for them. I am for them in every way possible, and especially in my prayers. H. Emily Cady tells us this in Lessons in Truth. To forgive does not simply mean to arrive at a place of indifference to those who do personal injury to us. It means far more than this. To forgive is to give to give some actual definite good in return for the evil given. I am love, I am forgiveness, and I am giving good for the person that I have forgiven. I could not judge how they perceive me, and it's none of my business anyway. I had myself in check, and I was doing my best. The best part was and is the lightness that I still feel this day around this person. Jesus once he was asked, how many times should I forgive? 7 times? Matthew 18:22 tells us no, not 7 times, but I tell you 70 times 7. In my case, it's 70 times 7 times a million. Forgiveness can be infinite and ongoing. And Jesus was telling us that. When we're living our spiritual life from inside out, forgiveness must start with us. And I don't know about you, but I've got a lot of silly and ignorant things that I've done that I could use some good old forgiveness for. From myself and possibly others. But I must work with my Christ consciousness, the I am, to go within and not just find forgiveness, but love and acceptance and more love and more forgiveness. Once I've established it within me, I can release it and I can become, or I can be, forgiveness and acceptance in a loving world. People who I've long respected have taught me about forgiveness. Nelson Mandela's name is synonymous with forgiveness. He'll be remembered to have lived and died loving and forgiving. Mandela said that forgiveness liberates the soul. It removes fear. And that's why it's such a powerful weapon. As the late Pope Paul II rode past a crowd in an open car in 1981, Mehmet Ali Agca shot him 4 times in an assassination attempt, seriously wounding the Pope. Pope John Paul II nearly died, but he underwent emergency surgery at a hospital to save his life, and then he recovered. 2 years later, the Pope visited Agca in his prison cell to let him know that he had forgiven him. The Catholic leader clasped Agca's hands, the same hands that pointed a gun and pulled the trigger. On his own, as the 2 men talked, and when the Pope rose to leave, Agca shook hands with him. And after emerging from the prison cell, the Pope said that he spoke to the man who had tried to kill him as a brother whom I have pardoned. I read a book by Edith Eger called The Gift, 12 Lessons to Save Your Life. Her other book was called The Choice. Now Edith was a native of Hungary, and she was also a Holocaust survivor, sent to Auschwitz at 16, where her parents were gassed to death the day the family arrived in 1944. She couldn't talk about the horrors of the Nazi concentration camps for decades after. This book has so many great lessons learned from her wonderful life. As a clinical psychologist based in La Jolla, California, she's still seeing patients today. And in 2022, she did a TED Talk. The great-grandmother has a 98-year-old boyfriend and loves swing dancing, though her favorite pastime has slowed down a bit because his legs are not keeping up with hers. She tells us that times are changing, and we're changing with the times. We're not stuck in the past or stuck in old patterns and behaviors. We're here now in the present, and it's up to us what we hold on to and what we let go of and what we reach for. Psalm 32:5, then I acknowledged my sin to you, and I didn't cover up my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. Just as God forgives us missing our mark, we must try to forgive others as one of our spiritual practices. I invite us all to follow Jesus, who put on his divinity to become Christ. How many did he forgive in that final week? Jesus arrived in Jerusalem on Palm Sunday to hear people shouting, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. By the end of this week, those same people will be shouting, crucify him, crucify him. Jesus chose to ride into town on a donkey, and he's described as a strong and healthy man. He had walked miles and miles from Galilee across Jordan through several towns, including Jericho, Bethany, and Bethage. But he chose to enter the town literally only a few hundred yards on a donkey. Why? Jesus frequently used humor, drama, and shock value in the work he did, kind of like me. He wanted to be sure he had people's attention, and every moment was a teaching tool. His entry into Jerusalem was no exception. Riding into town on a donkey was symbolic of Jesus being a holy man. He was coming in peace. Jerusalem means place of peace, and the people are happy to see him. The metaphysical meaning of the mule represents our human will. When it is ridden and it is obedient, it infers subjection of that faculty to establish order. The people were saying to Jesus, I have heard stories of your healings. I've heard the miracles you perform. I believe in you. I want to be part of this moment. I want to see it with my own eyes. And then the religious leaders there became angry. On Monday, Jesus respects the temple as a place to worship, and he enters the temple. He cannot believe what's taking place there. He overturns the tables when he sees that religious leaders are being bought and sold by the governing officials. Now we know in unity, what we know in unity is that we have to overcome things that are unbalanced in our lives. And we have to keep ascending in our consciousness ourselves. Back to Jesus in the temple, with all the corruption taking place in a house of worship, he goes a little berserk.
Mm-hmm.
And this precipitates the plans for Jesus' death. On Tuesday, Jesus enters Jerusalem and is confronted by the religious leaders. He says to them, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. We need to tend our own business. We don't need to tell others what their issues are and how they should take care of them. Our responsibility lies in tending our own business. Continuing with our story, later that day, the disciples stand in awe in front of the temple as Jesus predicts the destruction of that temple. On Wednesday, Jesus is anointed with costly perfume by Mary. If she was a man, she would have been a disciple. Or was she a disciple? Later, Judas leaves Jesus aside to tell the officials of his willingness to betray Jesus. And Jesus had been told that that would be done. We've all faced similar times in our lives. Most of us have probably been betrayed at least once or twice. Like Jesus, we have free will. We have the opportunity to run from something, or we can stand in integrity and do the right thing. And that sometimes can be difficult. That's what's happening today for Jesus. In a beautiful scripture verse, we're told, and Jesus makes this recognition, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Jesus knew what was about to come. In our own lives, do we focus on the experience of the betrayals and the crucifixions? Or do we experience the transformative power of forgiveness and resurrection? Because remember, before the ascension, there had to be forgiveness. On Thursday, in preparation of the Passover, we're told in Luke 22:10 that Jesus said to two of the disciples, when you enter the city, a man carrying a jug of water will meet you. Follow him to the house he enters and say to the owner, the teacher asks, where is the guest room where I may observe the Passover with my disciples? So this was on Thursday. He will show you a large upper room, the place where we break bread. Passover is a holy time in Jewish tradition, and in unity, it's a time for God's covenant with humankind through God's perfect idea, Jesus Christ. This covenant of everlasting life and oneness with God began with Jesus breaking bread and eating of divine substance and sharing water and wine, drinking of divine life, kind of like what we do in fellowship, only without the wine. When we partake together of substance, our awareness raises and we're uplifted. When we understand and live the truth of Christ within us rises. Jesus was preparing his disciples to become teachers and ministers. Today, we are the disciples. We are the teachers, and we are the ministers. Jesus tells the disciples, I will not eat again until I enter into the kingdom. And during the meal, Jesus gets up and unexpectedly begins to wash the disciples' feet. The greatest among you shall be the least, and the ones who rule shall serve. This symbolizes Jesus' loving, humble, comforting, and forgiving ways. We too are asked to do as Jesus did. I invite you to look around this room today. See the Christ consciousness in each other. You can see it there. I see it every Sunday from up here. This beautiful energy that is the Christ consciousness of you. Jesus then tells the disciples, one of you will betray me. As Jesus prepares to leave the upper room, he says to the disciples, let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, but believe in me also. Peace I leave you, and my peace I give to you. Jesus knew what was coming, but chose to live in a state of peace. He chose the high road. And we're asked to choose the high road in our lives when things appear less than peaceful. The disciples followed Jesus to Gethsemane, and the disciples couldn't stay awake, and he sat alone with his fears, and he asked God, is it possible for this cup to pass from me? And it comes back, not as I will, thy will. Jesus was non-resistant to what he knew would be taking place, and he had to face his death alone. How many people do you know that could do the same thing? It's not easy to surrender. Can you imagine how sacred the man that became the Christ was? Late Thursday night into Friday morning, Jesus was arrested, and he was so popular he had to be arrested in the middle of the night in a secluded place because so many people loved Jesus. On Friday, there are many connections made between Hebrew and Christian scriptures, a fulfilling of the law. As the Jews prepared lambs to be slaughtered for their Passover meal, Jesus is about to be led to his death. And this is how Christians have come to understand the term, the Lamb of God. On Good Friday, Jesus is sentenced to death and he's crucified. The Gospel of Jesus tells us that this is not a sad occasion, because Jesus has fulfilled his mission. Because of Jesus, others would choose to live a new life. And then Jesus was laying in a tomb. The tomb represents the human journey of life, our trials and our sufferings. But we all know that we have the power to move the rock and experience the resurrection ourselves. When we choose to clean house, to clean our consciousness, and enter into the kingdom of divine ideas and perfect harmony. And Jesus said, here I am, Lord. Do your work and will through me. And when we sang this song, I believe that we're saying, I will step up to the plate, just like Jesus did. We will step into our divinity, let go of old ways, and embrace our purpose. Palm Sunday is about releasing the ego and following the will of God, surrendering to God's will. For we are to love and serve one another. And Jesus gave one commandment, love one another as I have loved you. Can we go back to the slide from the Daily Word? I love this as a affirmation. The Christ within protects and clears my way. Let's all say that together. The Christ within protects and clears my way. Let's do it again. The Christ within protects and clears my way. One more time. The Christ within protects and clears my way. we are all one. I invite you before the ascension comes forgiveness. Release what you need to release. And until next time, which will be Easter, namaste.
Namaste.